There I was, sitting in the warm light of my cabin hearth, reading upon the same magic text that my sister, Lalula, was to study for. It was a long night, but I was expecting her to come home soon. The life of a mercenary and former assassin comes to naught without its enemies, so posing somewhat as one of the upper classes of Dragonborn came to be my defense in the daytime when not at work. I would know in the back of my mind that peace would never last. A loud clang of metal ran throughout the forest, stopping my book. The distant sound of battle was something I knew well, but never as close as it was. I couldn't even tell how far it was, so I listened closer. A booming roar thundered right after. Was it a monster and a hunter in these woods? The roar echoed through the log cabin with equal force. I grabbed my spear in anticipation. The whole forest began to rumble like a battlefield with another metal clang. Suddenly, a deep voice called to me. "Yes, run!" It commanded. I could not even tell where it was. The sound of battle continued, and I had enough of this. I would not allow whatever it was to allow the roof to fall on top of me, nor be complacent with whatever nonsense was going on outside. I ran outside and met the sight of a battle of indeed large proportions. A great knight, towering above the trees, clad in full armor, and a great green dragon were fighting each other. The voice that called to me began to make more sense. I rushed forward looking to get a closer view of the fight up close. Suddenly, from behind a boulder, I could hear the marching of armored footsteps down the normal trail. It became clear. An attacked group of humans was upon me and threatened to kill me for my misdeeds long ago. My first thought was I was Fort Daniels, the walled-off mountain city partially constructed by dwarves. The footsteps edged closer. I couldn't tell how many. Going off no information still, I brandished my spear from behind the boulder. I struck out as the figure approached, knocking them onto the ground. I lashed out and pointed toward the knocked-out one, letting my magic surround and punctuate my stance. "Who are you?" I screamed. The figure on the ground was a knight in plated leather armor, holding a crossbow. There, I looked to my side and saw two more knights. They were preparing to strike. With the wind at my back, I dashed forward, looking to get the first strike. The one I struck raised his shield to block it, and came for a counterattack, which I dodged. I backed up and tried to cast forth the Psych Blast, but unfortunately, I overcalculated my attempt to cast a spell, and got a spear in the gut for my troubles. I tensed up, and continued the remaining motions for it, and blasted forward, slaying the knight spiraling backward. His friend behind him was caught by the lashed steam flames from my spell, putting him into a brief panic. I had to keep up with the pace. The first one I had knocked over with my spear was getting back up. I ran back and sliced at his throat as he was trying to get back up. The knight blocked it with his crossbow. The third one by that point had recovered, and I could hear him step one closer. I grabbed the first knight by the shoulder and threw him behind me and kicked him to the ground to make some distance between the third knight. I thrust my magic into an emote, with an increased confidence that struck the third knight with more fear. The rage, like fire, cast forth my weapon and pinned the downed knight on the ground. The third fled. I jabbed towards the downed one's face before he can get up again. I took one more glance at my accomplishment to see the second knight, who had stabbed me, was unconscious against a tree. I said my parting words, and then sliced the downed one forever. Above the forest line, the forest still quivered from the sounds of the dragon and the huge knight fighting. "Venus, run!" the voice commanded once more. It occurred to me that not just here, but nearly the entire forest was marked for the prowl. Behind me, the cabin where I was had been set on fire by more knights. I was both astonished and enraged by this point. Whatever kingdom was it that I upset this much, I wondered. Whichever it was, I would make sure they would suffer deeply in the future. I moved towards the sight of the two giants fighting, swords clashing with a dragon's claw and bite. Unfortunately, there was another group of knights standing behind the giant one, possibly supporting him. I did not need to mind them long, for the great dragon unleashed burning flames upon the giant knight's feet, roasting all of them except one. This knight had donned a full set of heavy armor and a tower shield to boot. We met eyes, and soon the shield knight began to march slowly towards me. I grit my teeth and weighed the options as a new challenger presented himself towards me. Although I had been told time and time again this night to run, I decided I would not back down from this fight if it kills me. The dragon, looming to my side, likely sensing my refusal to run away, gave me a glance and released a burst of rainbowish energy into my body. In that moment, I was rejuvenated, and I knew I had to make the most of it while the Tower Shield Knight was approaching. I cast Upswell, charging up the magic in my hands into a blocking formation. My assurance with a clear ally formed into a surrounding barrier. By this point, the approaching knight with the Tower Shield had reached me as I began charging for another Psych Blast. He struck out with his flail, and it bounced off and shattered the barrier as I released my spell, blowing him back, but not off his feet. I knew I had to capitalize this moment. I ran forth, my own barrier reforming, and tackled him with my shielded might onto the floor. His guard was now down, but his armor was solid. Aiming for his chest would be pointless. I had to disable this one immediately. With a foot on his chest, I thrust my spear for the hand holding the flail, striking through his leather glove. The spear dug all the way through the hand, releasing his weapon, to which I twisted. I relished his laugh of defiance, which quickly turned into a scream of pain, for I had locked the proud paladin into a checkmate. Suddenly, all focus turned to the fight against the dragon and the giant knight above. The giant knight swung his greatsword, slamming it into the side of the dragon's head. I felt the world slow around me with this final blow. The voice spoke one last time. It said that I would be called upon to action once more, whatever it may be.
Focus on the flames, and it will return you from whence you came.
The world slowed and slowed until the colors faded away and I was left in a pure white void. The man I had pinned to the ground disappeared, the spear clanging down against a patch of remaining dirt and the strange white floor. Around me, far into the distance, were shapes of people spread out, looking about as much as I had when I had been whisked into this alternate void. I inched closer, trying to focus on one of them, but they were too far ahead. I took a moment to reflect on what had happened at this point. From suddenly fighting for my life and land, to being placed in an endless room of white nothing. Those last few moments of the fight, I was at ease with the green dragon giving rejuvenating magic. I took this moment of silence to reflect, to cool down and regain my posture. And then in that moment, thinking back on what the voice said, I thought for a moment that there was a campfire behind me. But when I turned around, there was only the hearth of my cabin. I was now back where I was at the beginning of this sudden adventure. I have yet to understand what it all means, but I expect something unique unlike anything else going forward.